Welcome back to another episode of Henry TV. I'm your host, 22 Plinkster, and I get this question a lot pertaining Henry rifles. So you got you a Henry rifle and you've noticed that your eyes aren't as sharp as they used to be. And you have a little bit of trouble seeing those open sights and you want to put a scope on your rifle of choice. Right here in front of me, I have a 6.5 Creedmoor Henry Long Ranger, and I'm going to show you the proper way of mounting a scope to your brand new Henry rifle. Mounting a scope is pretty easy, but to mount one correctly takes a little bit of time. I've mounted hundreds and hundreds of scopes in my lifetime, and I have come up with my own way of doing things that are quick, easy, and you will really like it when you try to go to the range and sight that rifle in if the scope is mounted correctly. So I've got a few tools here in front of me to put this scope on correctly on this Long Ranger, and what we're going to be mounting here is a pick rail, full-length pick rail on top of the Long Ranger. This will give you probably the most versatility out of anything that Henry offers right now when it comes to a scope base. And it's pretty simple, pretty easy, so let's dig in. Let's open this up, and you can purchase this pick rail on the Henry Pride website, along with any other kind of accessories that you want for your Henry rifle. It's a pretty nice pick rail. I've used a lot of these, and it actually comes with its own torque bit and your screws. And it actually comes with an extra screw in case if you lose one. But before we do anything, you need to make sure this is clean. I've already cleaned this off pretty well. You can take a Q-tip and a little bit of rubbing alcohol and clean the grooves, get all the oil and all the debris out between here. I've already done that step, but I would recommend you do that before you start mounting anything. That will make sure that the Loctite seizes up in these threads just right so this mount does not work loose in the future. So I've got 5 screws here. We're only going to be using 4 of them. Take your blue Loctite. Henry actually recommends you use blue Loctite instead of red on the bases. So we're just going to put a little drop right here on the edge of each one. And it doesn't matter if you get a little outside of the threads here on the top. That's just going to make you have a little bit better mount. It's not going to go anywhere, I promise you that. And we're going to take the rail here. We're just going to place it down like so. And I have got a torque wrench made by Wheeler, and Henry recommends that you torque these screws down to 20 inch-pounds, okay? And it is very important that you do that. One, you don't warp the rail up or down. It's perfectly level. And not only that, you don't break the torque head and get that thing stuck in there and have to drill it out. You definitely don't want to do that. So this torque wrench is already set at 20 inch-pounds. And so what I basically like to do is just put it down there snug, like so. I don't want to torque it yet. And I work from the outside going in. And there's no real big hurry if you've never used Loctite. It's not like super glue that it's going to immediately start getting tacky. You've got a little while, so don't freak out. Take your time and do it right. And we got 4, and you can put that 5th one for safekeeping in case you do strip one out on accident. But if you do this right the first time, you should never have to remove this rail. So now it's set at 20 inch-pounds. Click, click, and one more. All right, scope mount is on. The base is on. So now I'm going to show you how to properly mount the scope, and it's going to take a little bit longer, but if you've never mounted a scope before or mounted one properly, you will thank me later, trust me. I've got my scope rings here. Mount these up real quick. And there's really no preference of how wide you want to get this because it depends on the scope. So I usually like to put them, not on the farthest end, but not really close together. So I usually like to leave like 1 or 2 gaps on the pick rail. But again, it all depends what kind of scope you have. So let me take my Wheeler torque wrench. Mount this on here real quick. I'm gonna crank this up to about 25. There we go. All right. Well, the bottom of the rings are now secured on there. Now this is where it gets a little tricky. You need the right tools, but I'm gonna tell you how to do it the proper way, and I'm also gonna show you a shortcut if you don't wanna invest in a proper scope leveling tool to do this. But I do suggest if you own a lot of rifles and you are mounting a lot of scopes on there, trust me, invest in a good scope leveling kit. So, all right, here we go. Right here is just a basic Wheeler scope leveling kit. This comes in extremely, extremely handy. I've used these guys for years and they work very, very well. All right, so if you've never used one, I'm gonna try to explain to you the best way I possibly can. All right, in my hands, I have a Wheeler scope level. I've got the front one already on here. So what you wanna do is find a good level spot on this pick rail, okay? Or you can actually use the scope rings if you want to, if you have a good quality scope rings. So we'll just use the scope rings right here. And a good gun vise will come in handy. So you basically just want to get this level. It doesn't have to stay level yet. So right now I am perfectly level on top of the scope ring. I'm going to double check with the base. It's perfectly level. All right, so now that this is level, you need to come over here and level this part. So now these two levels coincide with each other and they are both level. So now you can take this off and you're just going to be running the level of the rifle right here. Then you take your scope, place it down here on the rings, try to get it centered in between. And I'm not a big fan of using Loctite on the scope rings. Some people do. Me personally, I've never had a problem with the scope ring coming loose because I torque them correctly, I watch my equipment, but some people like to do that. It wouldn't hurt to do that if you want to. But I am, for the sake of this video, I am not going to be putting Loctite on these, on the screws on the rings. So now that it's up here, you'll want to take your level and just get it basically level. Make sure that the scope is level right about there. Now it's going to move a little bit, and you also want to double check your other level here on the front. All right, now we're going to take our torque wrench back, and I'm going to speed this up a little bit because it's going to get kind of boring, me just tightening up screws, but I am not fully tightening them up yet. I'm just dropping them in here. And it's kind of nice to have a good open workspace when you do something like this. If you're using very small screws, in case if you do drop one, it's going to be pretty easy to find. Now all I'm going to do, I'm not even going to snug these down yet. I'm just getting them down there probably about 90% of the way. All right, now that I have the top of the scope rings mounted, now you can tell that the scope can still move, all right? It's snug in there, but it can still move. So what you need to do is double check and make sure it's still level, which it is. And now take out your other level, put it up there, and then you basically want to make sure that both levels are now completely level. And there we go, right there. Okay, so now what you want to do is set your torque wrench down to probably about, I would say probably about 16 inch-pounds. Okay, every scope ring manufacturer will tell you on the back of the box or the package or whatever, get you what to put your torque wrench to. So I believe this was around 16 on these particular rings. And what you want to do here, if you're not careful, you're going to make this scope uneven again, okay, or unlevel. And what you have to do, you have to work from the outside in, okay? And you don't want to torque down all the way down to your 16 inch-pounds right here. You want to just take it down snug, okay? So what we want to do here, we're watching this level constantly to make sure it stays level. Work from the outside, go across, and all we're doing is just barely snugging these guys down. So always work back and forth and cross, because if you tighten down just one side at a time, your scope's going to go bloop, and that's not going to work. And the importance of having a level scope on a rifle or a hunting rifle is pretty much this. If you use a rifle that you have any kind of dialing, so if you have a rifle that has a built-in turret, or you know your clicks, whether it be mil or MOA, and you say there's a deer out there at 450 yards, if you go clicking and adjusting that scope in MOA or mil, and your scope is not level, the shot's not going to be level. So you got to make sure that your crosshairs are perfectly level when you mount it on there. Now, if you just have a regular 3x9x40, yeah, you can kind of get away with not having it perfectly level because you're not going to be dialing the scope. But if you're going to be dialing the scope, you must make sure it's level. Plus, when you sight in the rifle, it's going to be much easier and you're going to waste a lot less ammo. And we know how expensive ammo is. All right, so everything is still perfectly level. And I went back and forth and diagonal. And we're going to do the same thing again, but get a little bit tighter. We're not cranking it all the way down to 16 inch-pounds yet. Okay, we just brought everything snug, then we're snugging it up just a little bit more. All right, so now everything is snug. My level is still perfectly level. Now we're going to crank this down. Use the same method. I have mounted hundreds of scopes, and this is by far the best technique for me. Now, if you can't or you won't purchase a scope leveling kit like this, there's another way that I used to do it, is make sure that the rifle was level, and then I would put a plumb, hang a string with a weight on the end of it, and set it back probably about 30 or 40 feet, make sure the rifle's level, and then I would move the scope and try to line the vertical crosshair on that scope on that string that's hanging down. That will work. That will work fine. I have put dozens of scopes on like this, but this is quicker, easier, and in my opinion, more accurate. Final check on everything. All right, we are good. And inside of the level here is still perfectly level. It did not move 1 inch. And we now have a perfectly level scope on a rifle. So when I take this thing to the range and sight it in, when I make those adjustments, they're going to be true adjustments. If I have to go over 1 inch to the right at 100 yards, I just move it 4 clicks and I'm there. I don't have to worry about going a 1/2 inch high and only a 1/2 inch left when trying to move it over just 1 inch to the right. So I hope this video has been informative for you. I hope you've learned a little bit. Now it's just time to take this Henry to the range, sight it in, and get ready for deer season. If you have any questions, you can put them in the comments below, or you can go to Henry's Facebook page, Instagram page, or Twitter pages and ask those questions there. And remember, if it's not made in America, it's not going to be made at all.